So I'm going to talk to you a little while about the quadrants. This is part 3 of our series on the quadrants. I want to talk about how each of the quadrants is important when talking about racial issues, and that there isn't one quadrant that is superior to the others. Um, so normally when people talk about racial issues, I notice they concentrate on one quadrant and neglect the other three. I think two of the biggest reasons for that is one, black people don't want to um, admit that some stereotypes have some truth to them. And I think the other big issue is that most white people don't want to admit society's role in the state that black people currently find themselves in. And I think as integralists, since we have these tools, we can actually sit down and really see what is going on and the entire issue, and we can start working towards real solutions without simply pointing the finger at somebody or complaining about things in the past the whole time. So we can have real solutions to have real dialogue within the integral theory. So I'm going to jump right into it, starting at the first quadrant, which is interior singular. So this is the way thoughts and beliefs affect racial issues. And so a lot of people will say something like I've been told before on my website that the problem is race is that black people see themselves as black. And if we just stop seeing ourselves as black, a lot of racial issues would just go away. And that if there is a problem, it's because we're just projecting our feelings or our thoughts, what we think people are thinking, onto a situation, and we don't even know if that's the problem or not. And I don't agree with that. I mean, there are times when people are just projecting race onto an issue when it's not really there. However, you can't just stop seeing yourself as a black person. I mean, even if you were able to do that, I mean, that doesn't mean most of the first tier world would do that. So even if I walk around and just consider myself Dave, if I'm pulled over by the police, he might not understand that I'm this independent individual who just makes my own decisions. He's going to see me as part of a collective, and he has a whole way to look at that collective before he even came into the situation with me. So for me to just say that I'm an independent individual and I'm not part of a group and I'm just myself, that's kind of ridiculous in a world where I'm going to face discrimination. I have to understand where I stand in the world, own it, and understand that as part of my identity. And so, yes, there are probably situations where black people are just projecting something onto the situation. However, that's not a majority of the time. So, those I-space solutions do matter, but they're not everything. And then the second one would be the the singular exterior, which is your behaviors. So people that concentrate on behaviors will do things like say, oh, well, black people need to save more, or black people need to get better at interviewing to get jobs, or something along those lines. And they put themselves in more of the self-help, self-improvement camps. And so the self-help industry generally is more of a right-wing industry because it's based on the idea that people could just buy some DVDs or some books and they can make themselves better, and no systematic changes are needed. So there is value in improving your behaviors. Of course there's values in improving your behaviors. Learning how to interview properly will give you more of a likelihood to get a job. Learning how to write a resume properly will increase your likelihood of getting a job. But there's tons of studies that say that people with a black sounding name like Jamal or Rashad or something like that, they're way more likely to get their resumes overlooked or just simply thrown away. And so even if it's a well-written resume, it doesn't change the fact that a person coming into the interview is already prejudiced against black people. So even if you give an amazing interview, it may or may not even matter. So it's important for us as integralists to understand, yes, something's important, but yes, it also has its limits. So the singular X theory is important, but it doesn't fix everything. Now, the other side of it would be the collective interiors. And so people that concentrate on the collective interior issues would concentrate on different pathologies or issues within the black community. So they might, one thing I hear often is black people worship gangster culture. And there are black people who are part of a counterculture and are part of more taking the gangster rap or the hip hop, urban gangster flavor too far to an extreme and idolizing people they shouldn't idolize. That does happen. It did happen a lot more in the 90s, early 2000s. But again, that's not all of black people. That's not all of black culture. There are issues in the black community around education and people feeling like not putting enough effort into getting educated. That does happen sometimes, but that's not the whole story. And so even when black people do get educated, a lot of times it doesn't fix any problems. Like, for example, statistically, a black person with a bachelor's degree has the same unemployment rate as a white guy with high school. So you have to look at the entire issues and different problems before you really just make those assessments. So if you're hearing someone concentrate on too much on different pathologies in the black community or different issues in the black community, I mean, they're taking one quadrant and not they're looking at the other four. And the last quadrant would be the collective exteriors, which would be laws, cultural norms, and things like that. And so in this camp, we have things like affirmative action, welfare program to help the poor, which disproportionately helps black people because black people have been systematically left out of the economy for so long. Many of us haven't got caught back up yet. So these things are important. Affirmative action is important. Having set-asides for going to school, as far as money and grants for minority scholarships and everything, that's very important. But again, that's not the whole story and won't fix everything. I mean, I went to school on minority scholarships, so I mean, I'm a product of that. But at the same time, I had to learn how to study, I had to learn how to interview, I had to learn how to dress on an interview, and I had to work on various shadow elements within my interior singular to get ahead. And there will be, hopefully there'll be soon a movement of shadow work within the black community so we can move forward through a lot of things that we are having issues with and have healthier relationships with each other in the outside world. So when many right-wingers and many integralists too say things like, oh, well, there's no laws that can stop racism and you can't have a law to make people love each other. That's true, but that doesn't mean the law should be completely dismissed either. And that doesn't mean these social programs should be completely dismissed either. So I think as integralists, we should be able to sit down, understand the magnitude of the problems, understand how each factor contributes to it, and I think we can come up with real solutions for these problems. I think we're the only group that can do it. We're the only group looking at all these issues at the same time to improve what's going on in the world. So I mean, if not us, nobody can do it. So I think it's important that we really sit down and deal with this from an integral perspective and see how all these different factors come into play.